Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, on a cold November morning, we woke up as Americans to a country that looked like this. It was a new world. Not really, but at the very least it felt like it was somewhat of a new world, or a new country anyway. The person who was representing the blue side of this equation was Hillary Clinton. She was supposed to be the most qualified candidate in the history of candidates, and yet she lost to a reality show host. Now, not wanting to necessarily deal with the fact she lost to a reality show host, she obfuscated. The party itself obfuscated. You must understand, the party had several problems that it was dealing with. They had 15 million people leave the party. You had a crisis of legitimacy with so many people leaving the party and not being able to win elections. You lost the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, in addition to 1,100 seats all throughout the United States. That is a crisis of failure. That is relentless failure. Now, how do you deal with that? Especially, how do you deal with that if you don't really want to address the issues that caused that in the first place? You need something to obfuscate. You need something to throw as red meat, as some kind of red herring to get the public off of your scent and off of your back. Because fact is, Medicare for All, college drugs program, you had a socialist running in the party itself. All of these things are pushing on the party system, pushing on the political apparatus, pushing to try to get changes in the direction of the left. They don't want to deal with these changes. It was easier to use the political tactic of Russia and red baiting and a kind of neo-McCarthyism in order to try to blunt the populist rhetoric, blunt the populist movements, and try to focus on this kind of existential threat, this enemy of sorts, to chill the attacks that are aligned at the party itself, if that makes sense. I hope I'm saying that correctly. The point that I'm making is they were incentivized to use this particular strategy as opposed to actually dealing with the issues that people were pissed off about and dealing with the issues that caused them to lose this much. They didn't want to deal with those issues. Now, I will make the contention, and I've made this contention before, that everyone in this process is incentivized to behave a particular way in this process. Meaning you don't necessarily have honest actors. Everyone has a political motive. The Republicans want to protect Donald Trump, so they're going to do whatever they have to do to protect Donald Trump. They're political actors. They're partisan. Democrats have no paradigm, and I'm talking about the regular run-of-the-mill Democrat Hillary voter, have no paradigm for why that woman could lose to reality show hosts. Zero. Bringing up Trump and Russia allows them an understanding of the world. Oh, she didn't lose because she was a horrible candidate. She didn't lose because people hated her. That fucking Russia. And that goddamn Bernie Sanders, but definitely that fucking Russia. You can understand that this allows their image of the world to be secured. Mind you, it's delusional, but it allows their image of the world, their understanding of the world, their fantasies to remain secure. Thing is, the Trump and Russia thing, when you look into it, it starts to somewhat fall apart. Going back all the way in 2015, there's emails from WikiLeaks where Hillary Clinton is talking about, or emails are sent to Podesta saying, use the bromance between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin to slay Donald Trump, essentially to attack Donald Trump for having some kind of buddy-buddy or want to be conciliatory towards Russia. It's like, who is this guy not wanting to go into another Cold War? Attack him because he doesn't want to go into another Cold War. Use that strength as his biggest weakness. And that's what they did. They turned something that should have been a political plus into ultimately what ended up being somewhat of a political weakness. Him wanting to be conciliatory to our foreign adversary. On top of this, in the book Shattered, they recount the day after the election itself. Hillary Clinton deals with her team and gets that team out there on message saying, Trump colluded with Russia. Trump colluded with Russia. The other Democrats, being motivated, fell in line in the media, loving this idea of going after Donald Trump, loving the idea of having this reality show host more on camera and putting asses in seats with people who hate Donald Trump's guts, who are terrified, and who at the very least are waiting with bated breath to hear anything to get his ass out of that office. The people that are in this process are motivated to behave in the way that they're motivated, or that they're behaving. The evidence itself is not necessarily the strongest thing in the world. This is purely based on motivation, or at the very least, the overwhelming majority of this is based on motivation. They've screamed about Trump and Russia for 2 years and have not been able to demonstrate anything. What we do know is they surveilled his campaign illegally, not revealing the information to the FISA court. We know that there were FBI agents that allowed Hillary Clinton to walk, while at the same token being instrumental in making sure Donald Trump was on the hook for the Russia thing. We also know that the person who tipped off the FBI in the first place goes back to the Clinton Foundation like 20 years. All links lead to Clinton, or at the very least, all links lead to the Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton, and some kind of collusion in this case. Nevertheless, they went after Donald Trump with this. Now, the bombshell came with the Trump dossier, the PP dossier, the explosive, salacious dossier saying that Donald Trump paid a hooker in Moscow or in Russia to pee on the bed that Obama slept in because he hated Obama that much. Buzzfeed printed this article. Now, the catch to this is there are people who are named in the article. Buzzfeed in no way knew whether or not that article was true. It published it anyway. And therein lies Buzzfeed's problem. All of this stuff is based on something that the Democrats said, not necessarily something that people actually had. The Democrats screamed that their server was hacked. They scream that Russia did it. Russia hacked us. Take our word for it. They don't give it to the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the people who are supposed to actually investigate those type of things. You're saying that a foreign actor hacked your computers. And your first impulse is to go to a private corporation in order to get that corporation to do some kind of analysis. Now, mind you, that corporation that the Democrats paid for that particular analysis has been undermined with some of the shoddy work that they were doing. Meaning there have been holes poked through their stories from other countries abroad saying that the research and the stuff that they're coming to, the conclusions they're coming to, are not entirely true. So BuzzFeed has somewhat of a dilemma. BuzzFeed is being sued for libel by this particular Russian that was implicated in their case. You've hurt my reputation. You've said things that you haven't been able to prove, and you've damaged my reputation. You need to back up what you're saying. Now, this Russian is suing BuzzFeed. Now, in order to defend itself, BuzzFeed has sued the DNC. Now, the reason they've sued the DNC is because BuzzFeed is making this argument that the DNC is saying that it has evidence and information that would allow BuzzFeed to defend itself against the libel suit. Understand what's being said here, because this is fantastic. For all intents and purposes, there is no data per se. There's no smoking gun. There's nothing for them to back this dossier on. BuzzFeed is literally suing the DNC to try to get information to back up the dossier, suing the FBI to try to back up the dossier, because as of yet, they have nothing to do so. They have nothing to do so. And I'm going to read the article, but the other wild part about this, they've been gallivanting around the globe to try to get information to try to clear their name on this. Now, the wild part about it, the DNC has told BuzzFeed, no, we're not giving you squat. The reason they're not giving them anything, at least according to the DNC, I would call this somewhat of a fig leaf, but they don't want the opportunity, or they don't want to create a potential for themselves to be hacked again. Meaning revealing that information, the breadcrumbs, the remnants, revealing that information, they believe will make themselves more susceptible to being hacked again. Now, that sounds insane that you didn't fix the issue the first time around, but what's more likely? They didn't fix the issue the first time around. They said, fuck it, we were hacked, so we'll just let it ride. And so we can't reveal anything else because, we don't want to get hacked again in the same way. Or they didn't give their information to the FBI because there wasn't really information to give. Because for all intents and purposes, they weren't hacked at all. They knew it was a leak, and they used this purely to go after Donald Trump. And the reason that the DNC is not giving them information is because there's not really any information to give. That's my contention. That's what I'm asking. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Like, they've been venerating the FBI as being the word of God. The FBI, CIA, NSA, 17 intelligence agencies have said 17 intelligence agencies didn't say anything, even though they've been using that lie pretty profusely. Eventually, they nailed it back down to 3, but they've acted as if these intelligence services were the word of God. Now, they've acted this way because they dislike Donald Trump and they want to use intelligence services to hit Donald Trump over the head. Fair enough. I think that's somewhat dangerous, but fair enough. It's a little strange to me that you're going to do two things that are contradictory simultaneously. Yes, the FBI is the word of God, but no, I don't want that word of God, God's mouthpiece, to investigate my computers, even though it is their constitutional responsibility to actually do that investigation. I'm going to give money to a private corporation to do this on my behalf. Now, the VIPs, veteran intelligence professionals, their research showed that this was most likely a leak and not a hack. That the information, the speed at which this information was being deposited or downloaded was more commensurate with a flash drive, not something that was pulled over the wire into another country. In fact, they went so far as to say it was physically impossible for it to be a hack as opposed to a leak. I strongly suspect, I have no proof, but I suspect that the reason that the DNC is not releasing the information to Buzzfeed is because they don't really have information to release to Buzzfeed. All of this is political theater. All of this was done as this kind of break in case of emergency or break glass in case of emergency, using Donald Trump and Russia as a means to go after Donald Trump in order to tarnish the presidency, to essentially lock up the presidency over the 4 years, to tie him up, to make him, to weaken and delegitimize the presidency. Let's take a look at the article. I was blown away by this. I didn't know this was taking place. This was last month, but I'm just coming across it. Buzzfeed is suing the DNC over issues involving the Russian dossier. Buzzfeed believes the evidence of the alleged DNC break-in by Russian hackers might help the online publisher in a libel suit, but the DNC says releasing information might make it more vulnerable to hacking. Does that really make sense? We're going to release information. I guess what I'm saying is this doesn't really make sense. Their argument doesn't make sense. A lot of this doesn't really make sense. You're hacked by a foreign agent. You're supposedly terrified, at least according to Don in Brazil. And you don't take it to the FBI. You take it to CrowdStrike? That's so bizarre to me. That's immensely bizarre. Why wouldn't you give your files over to the FBI? That seems the most natural thing in the world to do if you were attacked by a foreign actor. And in this situation, the Mueller investigation, is the Mueller investigation going to actually get his hands on the DNC servers, which at this point it doesn't? Or is it going to use the CrowdStrike report? And if it uses a CrowdStrike report, isn't that somewhat shallow investigation? Doesn't that just become political theater at this point if you're not going to get your hands on the actual servers that were supposedly affected in the quote-unquote hack? I'm just saying, it doesn't make sense. It sounds like a fig leaf. Robert Mueller's investigation into ties between Russia and Donald Trump's campaign maneuvers mostly in secret. But the infamous dossier at the heart of the scandal, which was compiled by ex-British spook Christopher Steele on behalf of the intelligence firm alternately retained by the conservative website Washington Free Beacon and members of the Clinton campaign, constantly finds its way to the center of news. First, there was Monday's juicy foreign policy story revealing BuzzFeed, which published the dossier in early 2017 and was subsequently sued over it, recently commissioned a team led by former top FBI and White House cybersecurity officials to trek all over the world on a secret mission to verify parts of the explosive document. Now, BuzzFeed has taken the Democratic National Committee to court in an attempt to compel it to turn over the information it believes will bolster its defense against Alexei, I can't pronounce that, Gubarev, a Russian business magnate, who says he was libeled by the dossier when it tied him to the Russian alleged hacking of the DNC's email servers. In a nutshell, BuzzFeed believed the DNC has information that could show a link between Gubarev and the email hacking, which would undercut his libel claim. We're asking a federal court to force the DNC to follow the law and allows BuzzFeed to fully defend its First Amendment rights, a BuzzFeed spokesman said in the email. BuzzFeed Motions asserts that the DNC, citing privacy concerns, has been unwilling to comply with its subpoena for information. As BuzzFeed lawyers argue, the material requested from the DNC, which amounts to only digital remnants left by the Russian state operatives who hacked their systems, is highly relevant to defendants' ability to establish the truth of the alleged defamatory claims about them in the dossier. and the DNC has identified neither privilege nor burden that would prevent them from complying with the subpoena. In legal papers, the DNC has argued that disclosing the digital signatures supposedly left by the Russian-directed hacking organization known as Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear would inevitably expose details of the DNC's information systems, possibly making them more vulnerable to another hack. Or there wasn't a hack in the first place. Or there wasn't a hack in the first place. One of the interesting parts, if you notice in the beginning, they put a team together. They go trekking around the world to try to confirm elements of the dossier. They're being sued. They're trying to bolster their case, saying that this is not liable, and they're trying to make a connection to the dossier itself. We publish this information. This person has something to do with it. This is not liable. Despite having these people trekking around the world to try to get information, apparently they haven't received information in order to back up the dossier. And I don't think they would be suing the DNC for information if they were able to get that information from some other place. If you remember in that interview, Donna Brazile, I think she had it with Tim Black. Donna Brazile was like, well, you should see what I was looking at. You should see the information that we were watching. Almost, for all intents and purposes, paraphrasing, take my word for it. We're not taking your word for it. BuzzFeed is not taking your word for it, and at this point BuzzFeed is being sued, so BuzzFeed is trying to get their hands on that information in order to protect themselves from that lawsuit. What I would insist, or at the very least I would put up as a potential, is that the veterans intelligence professionals are right. This wasn't a leak. This was a hack. This was somewhat of a charade in order to tarnish Donald Trump's presidency. In which case, the reason that they're not showing this is not because they're scared they're going to be hacked again. It's because they weren't hacked in the first place. I'm skeptical of this. I'm extremely cynical of this. They screamed about this for over 2 years. All of these people have somewhat of an incentive to scream about this particular story. None of them have demonstrated their case. And this narrative has moved from Trump and Russia to just Russia, who wanted to help Trump. The narrative is sliding all over the place. They can't keep the narrative straight. And at the end of the day, what the DNC is saying here doesn't really hold up to water. Doesn't really, it's not really up to snuff. So, and just one more part to this, because BuzzFeed also sued the FBI. Back in September, as I reported at the time, BuzzFeed filed a motion against the FBI and deposed FBI to depose former FBI Director James Comey and former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. The idea being that if Comey or Clapper were to testify, it would confirm under oath that the dossier was being discussed at the highest levels of government and was therefore of interest to the public. The reason I find this interesting is they're being sued for libel, and their attempt to defend themselves against libel is to try to get across this idea that, look, the information that we published was valid. There was truth to this bit of information. And they have not been able to confirm that there was truth and reality to the information that they published. And not just that, trying to go to the source of who was screaming about it, the DNC, once again, is blocking people from getting their hands on that data and that information. Meaning, nobody has verified what the DNC has said about this Russian hacking nonsense, with the exception of CrowdStrike. You're stuck in the situation of having to take the Democratic Party or CrowdStrike's word for it. Do you believe them? Do you take their word at face value? And I would make the point that you should not. You should not. So I will end it at that. BuzzFeed is suing the DNC. BuzzFeed is trying to get a subpoena to force the DNC to release the information to protect themselves. We'll keep an eye on the case and we'll see what happens. All right, guys. I just thought this was interesting. That's why I didn't mean for this one to go this long, but I just thought it was an interesting case. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, there's always Patreon. Thanks, everyone.